I call this meeting
Recording
of the
in
Planning and
progress.
Development Committee for February 2nd, 2026 to order. I will ask our chairman of the council, Chairman Blunt, to do the invocation.
Absolutely. Let's pray. Thank you, Lord, for another beautiful day in Greenville County. Thank you for the weather we've gotten, even if it was too cold and wet. We thank you for the safety that we had overall and pray that you be with this meeting tonight. Guide our focus and our direction and help us to do the best we can for our constituents. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I'll let you get seated. With the approval of the minutes as presented for the December 1st, 2025 meeting or a motion to amend them, are there any corrections? So all in favor as minutes is presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. All right. We're ready for you guys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first docket tonight is CZ-2026-001. The property is located at 506 and 508 South Buncombe Road and 1710 Hood Road in Greer. The applicant is Gregory Ashmore of SR Mulch and Grinding, Inc. for Etowah LLC. The 6.18 acre subject property consists of one parcel and is located approximately 0.27 miles northwest of the intersection of South Buncombe Road and Brushy Creek Road and currently contains an office and vacant commercial. This is the zoning of the surrounding area. Subject property outlined here is zoned S1 Services District. The request is for I1 Industrial District. You can also see the surrounding property zones. The applicant states that the proposed land use is a recycling processing center. This is the subject site and photos showing the area surrounding the subject site. Staff is of the opinion that successful rezoning to I1 Industrial District would be consistent with the Plain-Greenville County Comprehensive Plan future land use designation of industrial and would be consistent with similar zoning in the area. Based on these reasons, staff recommends approval of the requested rezoning to I1 Industrial District. Greenville County Planning Commission also recommended approval. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any discussion? Yes. Being no discussion, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
This motion has been approved.
The next docket is CZ-2026-002. The property is located at 105 Pebble Creek Drive and Kindlen Way in Taylors. The applicant is Sergey Tushko of Green City Homes for Stone Ridge Golf LLC. The 3 acre subject property consists of a portion of one parcel and is located approximately 0.28 miles northwest of the intersection of Pebble Creek Drive and Stallings Road and currently contains sport courts, a clubhouse, and parking areas. This is the zoning of the surrounding area. Subject property outlined here is zoned PD, Planned Development District. The request is for PDMC, Planned Development District Major Change. You can also see the surrounding property zones. The applicant states that the proposed land use is single-family attached or multifamily residential. The applicant is proposing to reallocate 3 acres of land within the PD from community recreation to 1.8 acres of single-family attached or multifamily residential units and 1.2 acres of passive recreation space. Within the residential area, there would be a maximum of 24 units, with each unit being a maximum of 2,000 square feet in size with a maximum of 45 feet in height. Units would be constructed in a townhome style with a variety of materials and no more than 3 units attached per row. A shared driveway may be shared by up to 3 units and 2 parking spaces provided per unit with a minimum of 36 parking spaces. The applicant is proposing a 30-foot setback along Pebble Creek Drive and Kindlen Way with a canopy street tree placed every 40 feet of road frontage. 200 square feet of additional recreation area will be provided per unit. Signage will be compatible with the architecture of proposed buildings with a maximum height of 6 feet and maximum width of 10 feet. Site lighting will be a maximum of 16 feet in height with full cutoff fixtures. This is the subject site and photos showing the area surrounding the subject site. In the initial rezoning application, which established the Pebble Creek PD, the protection and preservation of existing and future recreational amenities was listed as one of the primary intentions of the development. To achieve this, 183.4 acres of open space was meant to be provided within the PD. On review of the zoning records, staff only finds evidence of approximately 165 acres of open space within the PD as it currently exists. Additionally, a set number of single-family and multifamily units were established within the statement of intent for Pebble Creek. Development estimates for the PD submitted by the applicant indicate that more single-family dwellings have been constructed than were meant to be allowed in the PD, and the golf course occupies more acreage than was initially planned. While development overall is still under the total allowed units, this is due in part to the construction of more single-family homes and less multifamily dwellings that should have been permitted. Staff is of the opinion that the reallocation of open space within the PD for more residential development would further reduce the total open space within the development, and this incremental reduction of open space would undermine one of the principles on which the PD was established. Based on these reasons, staff recommends denial of the requested rezoning to PDMC, Planned Development District Major Change. Greenville County Planning Commission also recommended denial. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any discussion? I'm sure if you want.
Can I ask the staff? Was this originally part of like the Pebble Creek community, like a HOA clubhouse, and the HOA sold this guy the property, or kind of behind on that one?
So this was part of the original development, having the driving range, the tennis courts, things of that nature. I don't know as far as the sale of the property and, the transaction of the, history of the property, but it was part of that to my knowledge. The applicant's here. If you'd like to ask them that question, they may have some further information.
Is the applicant here?
Stephanie Gates, Site Design, 225 Rocky Creek Road. I'm representing the applicant as the civil engineer. The property is under contract for the 3 acres that are outlined, which includes the tennis courts, which are no longer open for use, and a clubhouse that went along with the tennis courts that is no longer open for use. Well, it appears to be abandoned.
So the clubhouse with the pool.
No, the clubhouse with the pool is a separate
Separate
is a
thing.
different, yes.
Okay, where's the clubhouse? I see tennis
It's right
courts.
there on the corner.
Oh, that little clubhouse.
Yep.
Who was the seller?
The golf course,
So the golf course, which is not part of the HOA.
which is not part of the HOA, no, sir.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Appreciate it.
Mr. Fanning?
Why is the tennis courts and the clubhouse in such disrepair? It just looks.
I can't answer that except for that they are no longer open.
Well, it just my opinion. Obviously, it shouldn't just stay like that. Even if we don't do this, that shouldn't just continue to be like that either.
Oh, mine's more for staff.
Is anyone from the, well, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
That's all the question I had for
Sure.
the
Thank you.
designer. Is there anyone here from the HOA? Anybody, I mean, like that's on the board of the HOA or like legitimately represents the HOA, not just a resident?
So I will say, as far as the HOA goes, am I Michael? Yeah. There's several different pockets of developments within this overarching Pebble Creek. There could be separate HOAs per the different pockets of different developments that have taken place incrementally over time.
So I guess my question is, do you know who the seller is?
The
to them?
seller of that property,
Correct.
the current property owner is
Starbridge Golf.
Starbridge Golf LLC.
Are they associated with any HOAs? So it's just a
private.
private company that owns that. Has anyone in the crowd know that has an HOA approached them to buy the property? I mean, it is a private owner. Okay.
For 4 years.
All right. And they don't want to sell it.
They want to sell it to a developer.
They want to do high-density multifamily, make as much money as they can.
One person who knows a lot of stuff, come on up so I can ask you a few questions. Who knows a lot?
Well, I've been involved.
Okay, come on up. Come on up. Tell us your story
You
real
act
quick.
like you didn't know how to walk up
I
to
want to hear from the
microphone.
community.
Maybe
Have-
your name
what-
and address for the record, please.
So we have attempted to work with.
We just need your name and address real
with-
quick.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Brenda Buchick, 200 Barrow Way,
Awesome.
Which we
Taylor's.
already know.
We
right?
know, but we want it for the record.
You can recite it for me.
all right.
But, yes, there are various pockets of development that have been attempted. My neighborhood was one of those. We sued, and we didn't win, but he backed down. So, but it's been going on for 4 years now. And some of the holes that are being developed were zoned R12. But the PD is considered the original Phase 1. That was the original 18 holes of the golf course, the pool, the tennis courts. And as you can see, our community, these people have lived there for 50 years, some of them. And also, the designer of the golf course is here. He lives in the same community. So I don't know, what else can I answer for you? We have attempted to contact the owner. We have worked with people who wanted to buy the golf course. He would not sell it. And there have been multiple attempts to buy the golf course. So
Were there any community meetings held between the community and the seller
no.
or the new owner?
I talked to him myself probably 3 years ago after what happened in our neighborhood, and I said, look, we have people in our neighborhood who will provide their services for free to help you market the golf course to a viable owner. And he talked to me for 20 minutes, and then he said he wasn't going to talk to us anymore.
Okay.
Chairman Blunt?
Thank you. And this is probably more of a question for staff, but I know this has been something that's been ongoing, obviously, because it's been in phases, but my question is more broad beyond this particular rezoning request, and it is when you have a community like this that moves to an area like a golf course, and they're promised these particular things to have a home in this area, where does the county have any kind of jurisdiction to say, well, this particular area was slated to provide these things for these people who then bought these properties with this somewhat guarantee to now it's all being just sold out from under them, right? You know what I mean? Just
Sure. So that question can be answered in different answers, essentially. One being, let's talk about the fact that it's a PD. So there being a PD, they're having overarching regulatory things from their own set of guidelines, their own statement of intent, their own plans to say how this is going to be developed. That's something that staff can enforce. Those are things that say, okay, for example, I had one the other day where there's supposed to be, not in Pebble Creek, but another PD, there's supposed to be a row of vegetation. Somebody cut down some vegetation. Oh, well, you're going to have to replant that because it's stated in the statement of intent that's supposed to be there. So, that's things that we can get involved in. Now, if they're just private deed restrictions and covenants, state law says that we don't enforce the deed restrictions. However, if we are given knowledge of the fact that there are restrictions prohibiting certain things, and we have not issued any permits, then we kind of hold off and say, you need to show us that you've been released from this, this statement, this clause in your deed restriction before we can move forward. We don't enforce them, but we don't, we try to honor them and not grant permits if we know that that's there.
Okay. And that's, I guess I'm just wanting to bring up the bigger point that I think we all need to be aware of is that some of these things look like an excellent idea, but if you're not in the right environment with the right state legislation and the county ability to help, then you're kind of putting it into a gamble as to what's going to happen 10 or 20 years down the road versus what you think seems like it's going to be a forever kind of thing.
It's interesting you bring that up. We actually, Todd, myself, and Draper just had a conversation today about PDs and about that specific thing. These PDs are set in place in certain time periods where, after so many years, the market changes, technology changes, things just happen, and, here we are trying to make changes and things of that nature. So it's, when doing review districts, it's really good to think, 10, 20 years in advance and not just think about what you're wanting to do today.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Can I
Chairman.
make one comment? Thanking the P&D committee because we are working on a zoning overlay for the entire Mountain Creek area, which would at least help protect the creek and prevent the future flooding. So,
All right. Thank you, ma'am.
thank you.
Any more discussion? All right, I need a motion.
Move for denial.
All in favor of the denial, say aye.
Aye.
All right, this motion has been denied. Next docket, please.
The next docket is CZ-2026-003. The property is located at 333 Gibson Drive in Greenville. The applicant is Michael Fernandez of Cardinal Capital Investment Group LLC for Hound Spray LLC. The 66.12 acre subject property consists of one parcel and is located approximately 0.77 miles northeast of the intersection of White Horse Road, Highway 25, and Old White Horse Road, and currently contains vacant land. This is the zoning of the surrounding area. Subject property outlined here is zoned RS, Residential Suburban District. The request is for R15, Single Family Residential District. You can also see the surrounding property zones. The applicant states that the proposed land use is a single-family residential development. This is the subject site and photos showing the area surrounding the subject site. Staff is of the opinion that successful rezoning to the R15 Single Family Residential District would not be consistent with the planned Greenville County Comprehensive Plan future land use designation of Suburban Edge, which calls for low-intensity development integrated into the natural and agricultural landscape at a density of 0 to 1 units per acre. Staff also has concerns about placing a large number of additional homes onto a relatively narrow local road with limited road frontage and no alternative access points. Based on these reasons, staff recommends denial of the requested rezoning to R15 Single Family Residential District. Greenville County Planning Commission also recommended denial. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Now, that's interesting. They sit there and say staff has concerns about placing a large number of additional homes onto a relatively narrow. What about Owens Glen? That didn't come up then? As much grief as we've been taking about that little narrow road and y'all gonna stick 300 houses out there? Anyway, that has nothing to do with this, but I just had a flashback when I heard that.
Will you go back to the zoning map, please? Right there. Okay, they're going to put 300 houses there? Am I understanding that correct?
I think it was actually like 100. Originally, I think it was like 70 some, and it was on
And now
septic.
Okay, now it's back to.
And they found a way to get sewer, but it went up above 100, I think.
My understanding is that they were having to try to get above 100 in order to get sewer. Under the R15, they could potentially have up to 191, but once you take the actual floodplain, probably not quite that many.
Just found a way to get sewer. Sounds familiar too, doesn't it?
Are you guys talking about this site or the one around it? For the 100-something?
Pardon? It would
That's
be
gonna come up in time.
this site that is highlighted in red.
What's your deal, man?
No, I wasn't going to say too much about it, but I will say this, just to the newbie eye, which I'll still consider myself since I'm 3 years in. I'll be honest, when I originally looked at it, I knew that Gibson Drive's an issue with the width of the road, but to people just based off, area zoning and what matches up, it matched the other local zonings, but I wanted to give staff a lot of credit for putting a lot of time into this, taking a look at it, because I actually agree with a lot of what I read. So I might have actually missed something on this one had it not been for some community members that had reached out to me and then what staff had said in their report that they gave us. So I appreciate the work they did, and I actually agree with it. So I will just, I move to deny this one.
All right. We have a motion for denial. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? This has been denied. Next docket, please.
Right.
The next docket is CZ-2026-004. The property is located at 2706 White Horse Road in Greenville. The applicant is Samuel Hamburger of Parliament Companies LLC for 2706 White Horse LLC. The 11.36 acre subject property consists of one parcel and is located approximately 0.12 miles north of the intersection of White Horse Road, Highway 25, and Interstate 185, and currently contains warehousing and distribution. This is the zoning of the surrounding area. Subject property outlined here is zoned C2 Commercial District. The request is for I1 Industrial District. You can also see the surrounding property zones. The applicant states that the proposed land use is warehousing and manufacturing. This is the subject site and photos showing the area surrounding the subject site. Staff is of the opinion that successful rezoning to the I1 Industrial District would be consistent with the Plan Greenville County Comprehensive Plan, future land use designation of industrial, and would be consistent with similar zoning in the area. The parcel has also been used for industrial and warehousing purposes previously and is situated along an active rail line servicing other industrial property. Based on these reasons, staff recommends approval of the requested rezoning to I1 Industrial District. Greenville County Planning Commission also recommended approval. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have any discussion on this docket?
And I originally had some concerns about it, but Mr. Hamburger was like the persistent widow. He was going to make sure he talked to me and talked to me and talked to me until I just basically just caved in. So no, I'm fine with it. Move for approval.
Any other discussion? All right, we have a motion on the table for approval. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
This docket has been approved. We'll move to the next.
The next docket is CZ-2025-073. The property is located at 1500 Cedar Lane Road and Orchid Drive in Greenville. The applicant is Noah P. Zauran of Bob's Inc. for Robert D. Mangum. The 0.643 acre subject property consists of one parcel and is located approximately 0.7 miles southeast of the intersection of White Horse Road, Highway 25, and Cedar Lane Road, Highway 183, and currently contains vacant land. This is the zoning of the surrounding area. Subject property outlined here is zoned C2 Commercial District. The request is for S1 Services District. You can also see the surrounding property zones. The applicant states that the proposed land use is a tow yard and vehicle storage facility. This is the subject site and photos showing the area surrounding the subject site. Staff is of the opinion that successful rezoning to the S1 Services District would be consistent with similar zoning in the area and would not have an adverse impact. Based on these reasons, staff recommends approval of the requested rezoning to S1 Services District. Greenville County Planning Commission also recommended approval. The Planning and Development Committee voted to hold this docket at the December 1st, 2025 public meeting. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I think Mr. Blunt, Chairman Blunt has some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you could go to the first slide, if you could go to the slide that has the aerial, that one, and then thinking about that one, move forward to the actual zoning map. Now, everything around that property site is C2 and has a car lot. And I might have asked this last time, but why is it that this one needs to rezone to do what all the other surrounding properties in C2 currently are already doing?
So this particular property, they're wanting to do specifically their tow yard. The adjacent ones, I believe those were auto sales, and then potentially across the road, I think, was some auto service work. Not specifically the tow and storage yard that these folks would be wanting to do, which they would only be allowed to do in S1 or I1. So that's one component. Also, I will say these other existing businesses that are in this area, they have been there for quite a while and likely predate our current zoning ordinance.
Gotcha. And that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure before I went any farther, because I know this one's a little different for me, so I wanted to have a discussion with my colleagues on it. But I know that this is a mixed-use corridor. My problem is that there's not really any mixed use from Orchid until you get down to basically where the plaza is, where Caprice of Berea is. So I've been spending some time talking to the citizens in the community. there's been issues with noise at the adjacent property. And really, they've just said that they don't want another car lot type facility in this area. And I've even stressed to them, I said, well, it's zone C2, so the liquor store could pop up there tomorrow. And they said they'd rather have something commercial they could walk to and purchase than something that was an eyesore. So this is one of those strange circumstances where everybody suggested approval, but I just feel like because of the area and because of the citizens, I'm going to request that we deny this one.
All right, we have a motion for denial. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? This has been denied. Next docket, please.
I guess Chris Harrison's in here anymore.
That concludes the rezoning dockets for this evening. I believe the next item on the agenda will be the resolution recognizing value of farms and rural communities.
I guess that's me. All right. You'll see on your dockets where we have requested a recognition of the values of farms and the rural communities. We have any discussion on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just speak to this one, and kind of this will be me speaking for the next one too, but this is really just to kind of give the agricultural community, especially in our rural areas, a chance to kind of have a seat at the table. If you read through it, it's not giving them the authority to do anything necessarily. It just gives them a chance to see what we're working on at the county, and if they see that there might be some problems with some of the things we're bringing forward, it just gives them an extra layer and extra time to get information to us. So when we make these decisions, we're not having to go back and change something because we find out it's negatively affecting them. So that's really what both of these are for, just to reinforce our support of agriculture in Greenville County.
Yeah, it gives us another set of eyes when we do something, before we do something that has effects that we don't notice. I think it gives us several eyes. If you think about it, we have one dairy left in Greenville County, that's Happy Cow. That's the last one. So we need to do diligent work to try to maintain our farms in our rural communities. All right, we got any other discussion? Do I?
I make a motion, we approve the resolution recognizing value of farms and rural communities.
Okay, so this motion, we have a motion to send this to full council, correct?
And county the whole next, yeah.
All right. All in favor of sending this to full council, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. The next is the task force. Chairman Blunt, you want to?
Sure, and this one's just, it's just creating this task force, and obviously just to make sure that we're covering all of our grounds. It says that we would add somebody from Greenville County Farm Bureau, Greenville County Cattlemen's Association, Greenville County Forest Landowners Association, and Greenville County Soil and Water Conservation District Commissioners, really just to give us a big, broad group of people to pull opinion and information from whenever we're dealing with anything involving agriculture, so we don't indirectly do something we shouldn't, and who best than the experts that do it every day. And again, like it says, there's nothing really they're an advisory group, so this doesn't give them any kind of judicial authority.
It also gives us a heads up if we have done something that inadvertently affects them.
Yeah, and at the same time, we're a growing county in a lot of different ways, and with growth, things evolve, and there might be some things in the agricultural community that they could get to us ahead of time that causes us to have to take some additional steps. So I just feel like it's a good way to keep that community plugged into what the county's doing, and just a good partnership.
Any other discussion?
I think I'd like to offer an amendment for Section 3 before we pass this up, and just to say, because I think we want to have this board to begin taking action immediately. If we stagger the appointments and wait 2 years, we'll only have 3 people probably making action. So I would say initial appointments shall be 3 of the members for 2 years and 2 of the members for 4 years, and that way it'll establish what we have. That way we can hit the ground running, and we're not waiting 2 years to get it really going. And however you best term that, Mr. Lawyers.
Initial appointment for 3 years?
for 3 of the board members, however you like. I mean, you guys came up with this, so whatever works best. 3 of the members will be for 4 years, and 2 of the members will be for 2 years at their initial appointment. Then we'll move into the 4-year cycle for everybody. That way we have a full 5-member committee to start with.
We could say that we'll start out with a full board and then stagger, we can word it to stagger the board membership down the road.
So we just go ahead and appoint a full board, and then we will stagger from then on.
That's what I said. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll have, say, 3, we'll pick 3 randomly, just put them in a hat, we'll pick 3 of the 5 agencies. They'll serve 4-year term, and the other 2, their initial appointment will only be for 2 years.
Okay.
And then we'll get in the
Okay.
4 years, then followed by a 4-year cycle.
Gotcha. We'll do that.
Sounds good.
So we need to vote on that as an amendment.
You did.
I offer the amendment that we randomly choose 3 of the sources for the appointments. They will serve a 4-year term, and we'll pick 2 that will serve a 2-year term, and then after that, it will be 4-year terms for everybody.
So everybody understand the amendment? All in favor, say aye.
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 I'll make a motion that we approve the item as amended.
Now we'll approve and send this to full council. All in favor, as amended, say aye.
Aye.
This has been approved. MFAP fees. Dean, you want to?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. This came out of the Planning Commission, I believe, last Wednesday, and the actual language from the motion that was made by the Planning Commission was not put on the agenda, and we need that, before you take action on that, we need that on an agenda. So we would recommend, if you want to talk about this now, that's certainly, you could do that. This is an item on the agenda, but the motion from the Planning Commission requesting a specific action by county council needs to be on the agenda and dealt with. So in order to avoid a potential Freedom of Information Act issue, I would just recommend, if you want to discuss it, that's fine, but I wouldn't take any action on it at this meeting, and we'll make sure we have everything copacetic as far as the agenda is concerned at the next meeting.
I'd like to make a motion to hold.
All right, all in favor to hold this?
Yep, I got one question on
Okay.
that. Do you want to hold this until the March meeting or the February 16th meeting?
Well, how much time does a lawyer need to get
We could do that, it could be done at the next meeting.
Let's just do it
With next meeting?
Yes, sir.
The 16th?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, all in favor, have it February 16th?
Aye.
Aye. All right. So now we are at Article 3.1, and I have asked our county attorney to run us through the history, and he's explained it one time, but it went over my head, so I need it again.
Is this on? Good afternoon. I normally don't get to see P&D, so thank you for that. Yeah, so on the agenda today for this item is a proposed amendment to the LDR that would add back what's now, is that sitting reserved right now? Okay. Yeah, add back what was, we previously had another version of Article 3.1 to the Land Development Regulation. And what has been proposed in this particular one is a portion that really was taken almost directly word for word. There's a couple of words changed up for the Planning Commission, but otherwise from a state statute. And question that came up out of our office that we brought up to individually to some of you about it concerned the enforceability of an ordinance worded this way, and I think that's what you want me to address. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we're going to approach it 2 different ways. The first way is through not a civics lesson, but this all emanates from the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, okay? Procedural due process, a fundamental part of our source of law here. So for anything, any ordinance, when we are telling somebody you can or cannot do something, or you have to do it a certain way, the requirement by procedural due process is that we have to provide the ordinance itself, not with meeting with people and discussing it with them, but literally what's written down for the public to see as the law of Greenville County, that it has to give fair notice to those persons to whom it applies what it is they can or cannot do. It's a pretty simple statement, right? It's, if it forbids, it's unconstitutionally vague is what the term is. If it forbids or requires the doing of an act in terms so vague that a person of common intelligence must necessarily guess as to its meaning and differ as to how it might be applied. This has also been actually covered by our appellate courts with regard to land use ordinances. And the primary thing to stick with you is that, this is a quote from the Court of Appeals, local governments have wide latitude to enact ordinances regulating what people can do with their property, but they must draft their ordinances so that people can have a clear understanding as to what is permitted and what is not. Okay? And so, and really, and then there's a corollary for land use, which is before y'all regulate, we have something called common law. That's applicable in South Carolina. And it's derived from like the Magna Carta. I know that sounds big, but it's literally how it was, like on down through all those laws that were applied that you learned through history. And property rights in the United States and in the individual states have always been one of the most fundamental of the rights that have been protected. And that our courts have said that any, it's a well-founded principle of law that any statute that's in derogation of the natural rights of persons over their own property to do it as they see fit, or as the right to use it at its highest utility, must be strictly construed against the government's regulation and in favor of the private decision to use land. So this is the governing law over all this. So when we regulate land and say you can't build X or you can't build Y, we can do it. Absolutely. That's why we have zoning laws. That's why we have LDRs. That's why we have those things. But these are the things that guide us on how do we do it. Okay? So first, I'd go back to what's been proposed right now, and then I'm going to address the second part of it. So if you look at right now, just for instance, and this is the best place to work this out. This is why we have committee. So this is a great place to start ironing them out because clearly there's an appetite for additional regulation. And at least, the ball is moving now, right? So here we go. But like one of them is like, okay, it's that the Planning Commission is authorized to consider the following purposes for denying or approving a subdivision application. One is to encourage the development of an economically sound and stable county. I understand why if you just read that, you're like, oh, that sounds like absolutely what we should be doing. The problem is how is anyone supposed to know what that means? Truthfully, it's an aspiration. It's what you're hoping your regulations will achieve, but it's not, it doesn't tell you if you want to do something with your land. And that doesn't just include subdivide it. It might be to have a rental property. It might be to do any kind of thing. We've got to show what it is you can do or not do to comply with the law. And I would posit that this kind of language presents a big problem because, quite frankly, I can't see, and nor can anyone in my office see where's the line. Where would anybody know what that meant? Because I can make up an argument for denying or approving something pretty easily and justify it as it is. It does promote the sound, economically and stable Greenville County, or it doesn't. I don't think it'd be very hard to come up with an argument to say it. And then, truthfully, then, it just really means you can just make a decision as the decision maker, planning commission, based upon vibes, right? Based upon no standard, just what we think at that time. And you can't really define or articulate that to anybody to know how to follow it. When the law is set up like that, we start getting concerned that it's just not going to survive a direct constitutional challenge by somebody who does it. There's a way to draft them that way. This just isn't it. I could go down the whole list of these, but if you read them, you'll start seeing that they're all kind of aspirational statements. And that makes sense from their source. When a court is asked to interpret what a state law, a local ordinance, any type of law given by any legislative unit or governing unit, any legislation, what it means, they first apply the plain meaning of the language in front of them. But if from that plain meaning, it's not clear what it means as to what's the dispute that's in front of them, they resort to what's called rules of statutory construction. And the first rule of a statute or ordinance of a court interpreting it, the cardinal rule they call it, is that they have to give effect to a legislative intent. Now, a while back, we didn't have statutes that stated its legislative intent. So you'd have to go pouring back through minutes of meetings, things like that. In South Carolina, our legislature, for instance, does not have a robust background information if you go through the bills and stuff that keeps it, that you could even derive it from. Federal has more because they have the Federal Register, which includes a lot of background stuff about any federal statute. Our ordinances, you know what our document would be. It'd be whatever the minutes were of a meeting. And you might have 12 people, 4 of whom are saying one thing, 3 the other, and there may be all kinds of different reasons why I get passed, and a court is left with, what do I do with that? So to battle against that, the court started saying, people who wrote laws said, we're going to start telling what our intent is in our own law. That way, if they get to one of these provisions that regulate that says this is what you can or cannot do, then when they go to that next step of, well, what did the legislature intend? What did the governing body intend? Well, statute started including intent clauses. So that would guide how you make a decision in this situation in the court. That is what South Carolina Code 629.1120 is. That 1120 is precisely the language you see in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of this one. So I get the desire, because it's like, hey, that's state law. We'll just adopt state law. How could we go wrong there? I get the fundamental understanding of why that would be seem like an obvious source of being able to legislate. The problem is the title of 629.1120 is legislative intent and purposes. And what it really says is that it says the public health, safety, economy, good order, appearance, convenience, morals, and general welfare require the harmonious, orderly, and progressive development of land within the municipalities and counties of this state. In furtherance of this general intent, the regulation of land development by municipalities, counties, or consolidated political subdivisions is authorized for the following purposes, among others, and list these. In that statute, what the state is doing is giving its power to regulate land to the counties in the form of the South Carolina Local Government Comprehensive Planning Act of 1994. It is saying that county and city councils, when you enact these ordinances, which we're now putting in your hands to enact instead of us doing it in Columbia, these are the guidelines by which these are the things you're hoping to achieve. And so these really just set up the intent. And so so they were never intended. This is when you see legislative intent section of any ordinance, these aren't intended as the enforcement arm, the actual thing that says what you can and cannot do. It's just that there's no way to draft an ordinance or a statute that at some point on some edge case, because you can't predict all future human conduct, it's going to not quite, squarely fit within the middle of that language, and you're gonna have to, as a court, if there's a dispute, figure out what do we do with this in light of this ambiguity. Maybe it's capable of meaning one of two things, for instance, in this context I'm saying about. And they say, I wonder which one of those we should adopt. The one they'll adopt, the one that most closely seems to fit within this general intent, the one that's the closest to that. But that is the kind of, I know y'all didn't sign up for a quick property and con law, first year law student, course here, but that's.
You've done good, though. You've done really good.
Well, we'll test afterwards and we'll see if you pass.
Okay.
But nonetheless, that is really the initial genesis of why, we have some concerns about this version. We're not saying there's no version that could exist. We say that it just needs work. And so I think that, but I think that this has gotten some traction from another sources even outside the county, probably because it is sitting right there in state law, so it looks enticing, and I understand why. But if you really look at it, it's troublesome in the sense that it really does just, why would the Planning Commission want this either? They literally have no guidance on how they apply it or where's that line drawn. Somebody comes to them with an application and says, well, you dinged me for not promoting a stable, economically sound and stable Greenville County. Well, what does? If it keeps coming, well, I don't know, but this ain't it. You could see why that's why you start worrying about there being a due process situation here, because at some point nobody knows what they can or cannot do. And that's the area we got to kind of navigate inside as we try to develop, a 3.1, which we can help with, but it just, we would recommend against going forward with something. And I think that's why it's a discussion only item on the agenda. But this is why. This is the background of why we think it's problematic. Sorry to go on that long.
Thank you, Chris. We have any discussion?
I have a question for you, Mr. Attorney. At what point does it become detrimental to the surrounding area? And at what kind of discretion would say if you had like we mentioned earlier, this property was zoned 40 years ago. Now it's all schools around it, but they want to put up a strip joint. It's zoned for it. At what point do we as a county be able to say, no, you can't do that? Yes, that is the zoning, but that is not protecting our citizens. So what point can we do that? I think that's the language that, having spoke with some of the planning commissioners individually, I think that's what they're looking for, is that discretion to say, hey, this doesn't meet the intent.
Right.
Which you mentioned in your own thing. What is the intent of that law? The judge are going to consider that. So at what point can they exercise intent of an ordinance?
Well, they can exercise the intent of an ordinance. They can't exercise the intent of an ordinance. The ordinance still has to, they would exercise it as best they could with regard to the actual enforcing language in the ordinance. I mean, the devil's in the details right there. It is when it gets down to and it doesn't mean it's a bright line. This is, if you have 10 lots on this type of land, you're good, or if not, it's not this one rigid, that'd be nice and easy, of course, but it's not reality. So it's not that there's no room for subjectivity, but that's a very difficult question for me to answer sitting here like that, because I would need a lot more information than what you just provided and what we're trying to regulate at. And quite frankly, I think that's going to be the challenge of doing this, because I think what there's an appetite for from this council, I think, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, and I'm not as dense as I usually am, that there's an appetite for getting some level of additional maybe toolbox items for the planning commission to be able to use to address subdivision review that isn't just, as long as you've checked these boxes, it's a mechanical thing, but that kind of takes into consideration some other more subjective issues. That there's nothing wrong with the law having some subjectivity to it. That doesn't make it illegal. When I say wrong, I'm not talking policy-wise. I'm talking strict nuts and bolts. Does it survive a due process challenge, which is really my biggest, that's where my office comes in. After that, it's up to the policy folks, and that, there's a lot of guidance can be handled with the staff and with y'all's judgment, because that's why y'all were elected. But we could help draft that, but it's not as simple as it may sound. Like it's a challenge, and it's why the original 3.1 failed, quite frankly. I mean, it just got out there and it was just too wide open. Are there other ideas out there? Yeah. Have we talked about some ideas internally as we approach, as this came back up? It's like, yeah, I mean, because clearly there's going to be, an instruction, so to speak, even if it's implied. I assume that you'd like our help in crafting something that fits the kind of things y'all want to do and isn't this kind of check the box and that's all that happens, and nobody, if you check those boxes, then you're scot-free. And so, and I agree that there's a way to draft these things, and it still may be challengeable, but at least we'll have defenses to it if they are, as opposed to something like this. But that's going to, quite frankly, take more work from both staff, input from individual council members, and whoever else has got some interest in the planning commission, input, and it's going to take some work on our end too to kind of put it together so that it fits some regulatory thing. There's some research we can do on what other jurisdictions have done because this is not something that Greenville County is unique to. There's other counties in other states. There's other that have dealt with it. So kind of researching what other things have withstood challenges would be helpful too. But this is something that would need to be done to answer your question.
Perfect, thank you. Who's the wheels behind this? Who put this forward? You submitted it, okay. So would you be open to having them review it and actually making it so we can present?
Well, yeah,
My biggest thing is, the intent. I think you hit it on the head, is to give the planning commission discretion to say, hey, we know what the laws are, we know what the ordinances say, but in this case, it doesn't meet the criteria of the intent of the council or the intent of the governing body at large. This is not what we want to do. So if you could craft some language to that effect, it would, I think that would help us greatly. But I see what you're saying is you're putting out some vague stuff here. It doesn't help anybody do anything really, except give the commission the option to say no for anything. And there's kind of a fine line between that somewhere. So hopefully you can help us find that.
Well, I mean, we'll certainly do our best that we can.
Couple things. I guess I'm the only one on council that got rid of 3.1 back in the day. Was that a good idea when we did that?
To get rid of it?
Yeah, when we did it, when Meadows was here.
Well, I mean, if you noticed, after 3.1's departure, we had a massive decrease in the number of new planning commission appeals that the county was paying for, either through some portion of set-aside insurance money or otherwise to defend against. And so, I mean, that was the source and the battleground of a lot of those cases, whether it was written in an order or not, that was, I mean, I was in private practice at the time of most of that, and I did a lot of planning commission cases, and I found myself, tap dancing around with 3.1 a lot because it was difficult. It wasn't that it was completely wrong. It's just there were things about it that were too vague at the beginning process that, because it would just say, it would be based upon, for instance, and the courts had a problem with this, one of the things dealt with traffic, which clearly is one of the things that people probably feel like is inadequately handled by the LDR currently, is what I'm going to guess is one of the big ones. But with that one, at the preliminary phase, there wasn't a requirement that there be a traffic impact study. There was no data on which anybody could do anything about. So, while the standard for overturning a planning commission case is an decision is abuse of discretion standard, if they have no basis to exercise that discretion on, let's say it's just, hey, sometimes when I drive by there, it's crowded, I get it, but at the same time, the kind of thing the court was struggling with is like, it can't just be based upon, some feeling. Objective thing to look at, or somewhat objective thing to look at, in which to then you could still be subjective, but there needed to be some grounding somewhere. And so that didn't have it back then. And then also the thing about the environmental stuff, I mean, that got to be the point where it was basically, I think that was the great search for the bunched arrowhead or, on property and stuff like that.
Looking at this, it is clearly a guideline. This is not intended to be a policy. Because if this becomes enacted, you might as well get a cot at circuit court and just stay there and have your food shipped in. Because this is where you would be.
Well, I'd need to go back out into private practice so I can make some money on it, I guess.
So, but I understand that we do need some better guidance. For example, I'm real sensitive about traffic and roads about this wide and 300 houses trying to go up. There needs to be that's where this kind of needs some teeth. A road has to be X amount of feet wide before and traffic can only be so much per something before you say it's okay to put 300 houses. And there needs to be some guidelines to regulate that has teeth that you can follow versus, well, I just don't like the way the street, how wide it is, or I just think it's too many cars. Well, what's too many? So I think I get the idea, but it needs to be clearly more specific and definable.
This is why this is a discussion. So we can't.
I still like you. I
wouldn't expect you to. This is the start of the discussion only. That's why we put it so we could discuss it. And then we are all on the same page, so we can move it forward.
I have a couple questions. I
Very
hate to
well.
put you on the spot, Chris, about this first one, but it's something you said. So when you brought up, I guess, the prior issues and when, we can't, with subjectivity, a PC member can't just say, well, I don't know what is right, but this isn't it, that kind of thing. What separates the decision power of a council like what we are, or a committee like this, where I just essentially said that even though all these checks are checked off, I suggest against something that, and planning commission. So what is it that council can essentially say, I'm voting no because I don't like it, and I don't have to give you a reason, I can just do it? What's the difference between that and where's the line that separates that from a planning commission, I guess my question.
Yeah, sure. The line here is that y'all are making a decision on whether or not an ordinance eventually is going to be passed. It's a strictly legislative decision. When the planning commission is making a decision on a application for a subdivision, for instance, they make zoning decisions too. But both. What they're doing, in essence, is listening to kind of two sides of the argument, we'll say, and then they're applying the law as y'all have adopted, whether that's the LDR or the zoning ordinance, whatever, and using that to make a decision. They're kind of acting like a court. They call it a quasi judicial, hearing, for lack of a better word. That's what they're engaged in there. And so when you're engaged in a quasi-judicial hearing, suddenly things like due process come in. Y'all are not adjudicating specific disputes. Maybe it seems like you are from time to time, but y'all really aren't. Y'all are deciding whether or not to legislate. Zoning is an act. It's an ordinance. The ordinance says what this land can and cannot do, or what zoning classification it could be in. And so when these zoning dockets come in front of y'all, even though you're here to make a recommendation, that's just what our zoning, the way y'all originally set up our zoning ordinance. So, the the thing is that what you're deciding is whether or not it's going to go forward as something that you then as a body will adopt or not adopt as a text amendment or a map amendment to the zoning ordinance, to the zoning map. It's a strictly legislative act. The Planning Commission is not. The Planning Commission doesn't have to worry about that when it's making a recommendation to you about an ordinance if they wanted to. They would then be not wearing their quasi-judicial hat. They'd be wearing their more, advisory to the, which is part of their role, advisory to the county council on legislative matters.
Right. Now,
Within their purview, which would be the matters covered by the Enabling Act.
No, and that makes sense. That's why I wanted to see if that was kind of where you were going with it, because it does kind of lean into what Dr. Fant said about if it is something we can use, it's got to be something that has more teeth, because they are using this in that quasi-judicial format. So thank you for that. I get the second question I have is based on anything I could find from the past 3.1 headaches that y'all had.
I was the seventh vote too.
Were you?
Yeah.
What, I guess where I'm having a hard time is it seems like from what I'm seeing is that it's almost two different conversations. The 3.1 problem prior seemed to be that the Planning Commission wasn't providing enough information as to why they were making this determination and why it compared to, why it was in violation of 3.1. It was almost just like, well, we're just not going to do it because we don't feel like it matches the 3.1, but they didn't direct it to where, how, those kind of things.
I will agree with you that unfortunately at that point, the Planning Commission was providing me with a lot of issues that I had to deal with, again, in private practice at the time. That was among them too. You're right. There was a question about adequate information at all from which the court itself could make a determination of what in the world happened. But these were discussions that were ongoing. I was in front of these judges a lot, and we'd have to go back and get the transcripts because sometimes, like they're supposed to make the decision on the simplest part possible, and so a lot of times the simplest part possible is send it back and let's find out what the heck they even try, why they do it at all. And then the other so the order would never get to the question of these 3.1 things are pretty vague, which is what the general consensus I was getting from the judges were. We were all getting.
But that's kind of what I'm wondering is, are the ones that really hammered us, which caused us to get rid of it, were they so vague as to say they really didn't say anything, and that's how we lost, is there wasn't a concrete, basically almost like a form that's filled out and shows specifically where these things are not meeting the qualities of this policy or this regulation?
I would say that they were closer to something that was not quite that, but they were not to the court's satisfaction that they were. Because again, they still lacked some semblance of, and the way it was being applied, quite frankly, at the time, as it appeared, is like somebody would come in and say, well, that's, there's too much traffic over here. And it's like, well,
right.
Based on what?
Right, exactly.
And it'd be like, now some would be like it's Stallings Road, okay? And I think we had one or two subdivisions out that way, and people were like, do we really need a traffic impact study to know that it takes people 400 hours to get home on Stallings Road,
Well, and I guess what I'm saying, too, to get to my last question, I don't take up everybody's time and everybody in the room, is, and I guess this is just in your opinion based on what you know, but when the county had to go to court because of 3.1, for whatever that reason was, had the Planning Commission provided a 2 to 3 page explanation upon why 3.1 was the reason they decided denial, do you feel like that the judge would have ruled likely more in favor of the county or the Planning Commission in those instances, or were they still said, well, it's still too vague?
First, before I could answer that, I really would need to go revisit those cases because we're talking now 2020, and I remember each case I was in on, but I don't remember them to that detail, so I'd have to go back and look. And then maybe I was cocky enough to think that I was going to come up, I was in private practice. I was thinking I was come up with some argument to save the day, and I mean, that was my job, so I would do it. But I will tell you this, I was always, and I expressed it to Mark and them, the former county attorney here, concerns from that I was up there that 3.1 is, it's causing us problems. It would be nicer if it were this, or it would be nicer, and I didn't give specifics, but I was saying, this is the problem we're running into. Now, sometimes, the problem we first need to fix is maybe we need to be more, specific in just saying motion to deny without any explanation, right? And so they did start to fix that. I think, they started trying to, grab onto sections of the LDR. Sometimes in, any port in a storm, just grabbing anyone there, but nonetheless, they were grabbing some. And this was a learning process for them too, because up until 2018, I am pretty certain, somebody can check the record on this, I don't know for sure. I don't know that there had been a planning commission appeal, ever. I mean, there may have been one, but I bet you we went 3-4 decades. Now, this was before the growth, right? So people probably weren't paying, it just wasn't a big issue. But I think for the longest time, so suddenly we got in this unique period of time when, Greenville's starting to boom and subdivisions are starting to pop up. And so maybe that's why the litigation popped up when it did. But, I think the original point of 3.1 was a complaint by the Planning Commission that, what are we doing? Are we just making sure they filled out the boxes and the forms right? And so it was an attempt to do that, but I don't know, and then, to the defense of the people who came up with those, there wasn't a robust area of case law that, we go by to know what the courts are going to do. We go by appellate court cases, and there just weren't a whole lot out there to give you much guidance. So we're kind of flying, we didn't even have the instrument panel working. We were just kind of, just getting up there, maybe starting to put the plane together while we're up there, and then find out when we're up there if we put it on right. And so we were learning. Right. But as we learned and we saw, and you could apply some of this stuff that I talked about earlier about procedural due process and putting fair notice to people as to what you can and can't do. But as we started learning that, that's what we noticed that people were centering in on. And there were a number of, and of course, every brief that we were fighting against when somebody would be, for the developer that is, 3.1 would be, highlighted in a big old section on how the vagueness doctrine and all this other stuff. And some of the arguments I disagreed with, but some of them, objectively, I thought, that could be problematic. And, and so I guess now, I think then, they got rid of it because they didn't have an alternative at the time and really did have a lot of appeals. So it sounds like now's the right time to try to do it again, but this time, we have some lessons that we learned.
Yeah, and last question, I promise. I'm trying to wrap my head around this because I know obviously it was a big issue before. And if it is going to be one we're going to discuss, I want to make sure the public and everybody else knows what we're navigating. But my last question, again, it comes back to, the different roles of the Planning Commission, council, staff, attorney's office, everybody. But when we're talking about specificity and legal standards, what makes 3.1 different than how staff navigate conditional uses, site plan reviews, things like that? And have we ever been challenged in court over those kind of things because there was some subjectivity to it?
I'm going to answer that the second part first, which is that I'm not positive normally if there was a decision like on some uses, that would be the zoning, it'd be go in front of the BZA. I suspect we have had challenges like that BZA wise. Outside the BZA, of course, any decision by staff is appeal. You can be appealed to the Planning Commission if the staff made the final decision on something. I don't think that's been, that was utilized a whole lot. So I don't know that it's come up as frequent. It certainly hasn't come up as frequently as it does in the zoning thing. Going on the thing, I think that, when our office is called by anybody who's forced to make that type of decision at the initial staff level, which would be the first line of appeal, right? There is some thought as to being, grounding it, I guess you'd say. Now, can I think of a for instance right now? No, one's not coming to mind, but I do know that those conversations have been had as kind of a question in, like, to our office and where we come in and try, yeah, but certainly, we try to make everybody as cognizant as we can of the need to, have this be, somewhat repeatable and also have it be something that actually somebody could know what the interpretation is based on. But as far as, again, I think that subjectivity has been bandied about as, I've heard it bandied about as like, this is something you can't be subjective about. You can. There are all kinds of law out there that allow subjectivity. And am I going to be able to perfectly draw the line between something that a court may say wrong, too vague? Probably not. I can give the bet, but we need some guidance in that area, and that's certainly something we can provide. And so, and it'll be up to y'all how far out on the edge to take it and how much, because, I'll grant you, there's room to maneuver in there. We don't know for sure. We don't have a robust set of cases telling us this is what this means and this is what that means and this is how far you can go and this isn't. And part of that is why we provide opinions and why we've studied this stuff and why we try to give you advice and that'll be that. But I don't have a good, as far as the first part goes, I don't think subjectivity is a four-letter word in the ordinance making business. I think you got to be careful with it for sure, because it can get to the point where it's so subjective that it is whatever somebody feels like. And I think when you're there, we've messed up, okay?
Right.
But like, I don't think it's a clear line or clear test that says, this specific one is absolutely, I can give you some that I know would be. But as far as ones that I think that, that where we're headed, I think there's going to be some that'll be in the middle area there that, we're not going to have a lot of case law that necessarily supports it, but we will have good thinking behind it and good the main thing I look for is, do we have a defense if we got challenged? Do we have a plausible, solid defense to it? That's my main goal.
I promise, it's like I got one more. They keep coming up, but I feel like they're important. The Board of Zoning Appeals, and I'm just trying to get a grasp of when we do move forward on whatever we work on, if anything, we kind of just know how it operates. But they're quasi-judicial as well, correct?
Correct.
And do they have any kind of standard that they have to make their decisions based on at all? Or are they just a body that decides based on whatever they decide, that's who gets approved and who doesn't?
I'm going to pass this off in a second here to Josh, because the first thing I'm going to confess is that I've never attended a BZA appeal. I think Mr. Campbell probably has at some point.
I think Josh is going to tell you something.
But Josh will be the best source about how they actually operate.
I just think it's important for us to
Sure.
put it all into a pot, because it's similar things, and it just seems like unless it's explained well, people can get confused really fast as to what can be that word subjective or whatever we want to use versus more hard lines. So.
Yeah, so the Board of Zoning Appeals, they hear three things. Essentially, there's a fourth one, but mainly they hear three things: variances, uses by special exception, and appeals of interpretations of the zoning ordinance. My interpretation of the zoning ordinance, the zoning administrator. Anything that they make a decision on a variance, they have to state what their decision is and why they're making that decision under 4 criteria as outlined under the state law. It's also in our zoning ordinance, but it mimics verbatim what's in the state law. As far as uses by special exception, they also have 4 criteria that they base their approvals and denials off of. They don't come out of state law like variances do, but they have their own criteria as far as being harmonious, having proper utility, provide things of that nature. So they have a different set of criteria. Anything that is decided upon by that board is appealable to the circuit court. So it would go from there straight to the circuit court. But I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
No, that's where I'll end it. I won't ask any more questions tonight anyway, but I would just say that if nothing else, that the way that they operate, it sounds like they document things well and give reasons as to why would be another thing that we would need to make sure we included in this discussion.
Yeah, and one thing that we do and make sure that they get their adequate training as far as when new board members come on. They have their hours, their 6 hours that they have to do initially, and then we also, also provide them training from the COG on how to draft motions, how to create that and answer those questions, and they've gone as far as having printed out kind of guidelines of, if I'm going to make a motion, this is how I'm going to start my motion, and this is how I'm going to go through it. And obviously, they don't have anything on their reasonings, but it's just kind of this is a guide of how I'm going to make this motion and create that, for the record. So, and then Planning Commission, they hear variances from the LDR and appeals of those interpretations.
Okay.
And one thing I'll point out is that under the Enabling Act, there's zoning has its own section in the state law, and in planning or land regulation has its own section, and that's the Planning Commission creation statute, and the zoning board, the Board of Zoning, must if they have an appeal in front of them, they must produce a written. State law does not have that for Planning Commission, and there are reasons why they're different and why the Planning Commission rests on its minutes. But I'm assuming that, I'm happy to talk about those, but I haven't prepared a whole thing on it. But I wanted to point out that is an artifact of the state ordinance that one is required to do one thing and one is asked to do something different.
No, that's perfect. I just want to get a grip for myself moving forward, so I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Dr. Finn.
Thank you. One last question, Chris. First of all, I think this is a good suggestion, but certainly not a policy that we could implement. I think we all agree with that. I think this is a good starting point. And if this is something we want to tackle to make sure we give the Planning Commission some guidance and some teeth, just an example, when you look at to encourage the development of an economically sound and stable county, really vague. You can't, what's that to who? Question, like those people who come to our meetings at the end of the meetings, council meetings, and complain about the traffic on a specific road. And they just moved themselves into a 600-house subdivision 2 years earlier. They moved there and complaining about the traffic. You part of the traffic. You brought it. Okay? Could this be such a way, see, I didn't call any names because I don't know if they're watching. Is there such a way when we do this, like limit subdivision size, that there shall be no subdivisions over 300 houses, or is that too much? I'm sick of these 600-house subdivisions, quite honestly.
Okay, well, that's something that we would, that may be, as long as there's no laws or rights that that you're totally stamping out that are protected by the Constitution, you could do it. But that's a question that I would need to ruminate over, with something specific. I don't have again, I'm not prepared to give you a full response to that.
Well, I know from experiences and people I know that there's something about how many entrances you have to have, and I don't know exactly per how many houses. So what the developer do is just divide that into two separate properties, so they have to put one entrance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they're going to try and skirt the law no matter what you do.
Right.
These guys are unscrupulous and just chasing Benjamin. So, to your point, I think that.
Right.
Yeah, but I know I like what you're thinking. I'm sorry.
I'm done. He said we'd be out by 6 o'clock.
Mr. Antley,
so
real quick.
asking questions.
Right now, like the unzoned areas of the county are pretty much the Wild West. So where does the commission? So there's not really it's not like a zoned R15. So in these unzoned areas, what criteria does the Planning Commission have to go off of?
Well, again, that goes back to the Enabling Act and what you give them that in the land development regulations. That's the criteria.
But I mean, you're not answering my question. I mean, what criteria can the Planning Commission use in unzoned areas to guide development if they don't have discretion? So when you craft this, I want you to craft it that way, or maybe we suggest we zone everything. I know that's highly unpopular to some people, but I mean, at least that would give us now criteria as a council to guide the growth. Right now, we have no guidance and people can do whatever they want, which is what people should be able to do. But I mean, if you live in a zoned area, you can't do that. So I don't know. But if I'd like to talk to you offline about that as well. It's like, how do we progress forward? Because that's what's happening with Owens Glen.
Right. Yeah.
It's in an unzoned area. it's just Wild West.
Right.
And the developer knows it. So,
Well, typically, density, just as a rule of thumb, is handled through zoning. I mean, that's just
Correct.
that's the mechanism to do it. I'm not saying that you can't try to skin the cat through an LDR in an unzoned area. I'm just saying it doesn't work as well density-wise. There may be a million other reasons. I'm not going out here and saying that we're recommending.
I'm not either. I'll be very clear.
I'm saying
I'm
that,
asking.
like, but generally, when people talk about density, I mean, this is like, what we study and what you learn, that's what zoning, that's the purpose of zoning, if it's nothing else, really.
Correct.
Is to be the regulatory, tool
Yeah.
for density.
and I think, back to your point, Chairman Blunt, is that, what's the difference between us and them? Well, now, really, because it's unzoned, there's no power, the county council's power lies in zoning, essentially, and writing ordinances to control that zoning. That's all of our power, essentially. So in an unzoned area, we've advocated that to the planning commission, which now has no discretion but what's based on state law. So anyway, please hook that in.
But no, I've understood the request as far
Okay,
as all
awesome.
that. Yeah.
And one more question. Can we tie these things to, say, road width? If the average car between 4 and 8 at night has to wait more than 2 traffic lights, things like that, are there tangibles, or are we getting too far in the weeds? Can we say, hey, if the road isn't 10 feet, at a minimum 12 feet wide, you can't put another development there until the road is improved without a variance?
I think that question is more of it's a simpler question from the law's perspective than it is from the, like, true engineering perspective. So
Would
I think
that hold up?
question-
Would that hold up in the court?
I don't know. I'm saying that that's something, though, that sitting here right now, I don't know. However, I think that, like, whether that can hold up or not, there may be reasons why it's unsafe or wrong from a lot of things done in the engineering field. I'm just saying that some of that sounds like a question that's not a strictly legal question, but as far as a legal question, I mean, we could look at what some case law has or hasn't done on something like that. But I mean, in the end, I'll say that I think that we understand the goal here, and starting 3.1 like this at least gets the conversation and the ball rolling rather than it just kind of being out there as a thing people grouse about, I guess. And so, which I think we understand what the goal is, and so we can, as I said, start chipping away. And then as far as, specifics and stuff like that,
I appreciate you're doing awesome and appreciate everything. I don't mean to be pushy, but I'd like to get something on a timeline. So when can we expect a product from you? What would be something reasonable? That way we don't get in the nebulous of why I ran for council. Things, let's hold it, and then 3 years later we're like, where did that go?
Well, can I have more than tonight to?
Absolutely. With all grace, with all graciousness, absolutely. But I'm saying, like, can
I
we
have to make
maybe
sure I
next
stop
P&D
all
meeting?
vacation from my office and everything to get. No, I'm just
Maybe,
kidding, but.
maybe the next P&D. Let's say the first P&D meeting in March.
I mean, we can have a draft of something started. Yes, we will
Okay.
have a draft of something to look at by then. I'm not sure that we'll sit there and say, this is the be-all to
But no,
end-all
but
for it.
let's
yeah.
keep
I
the ball
understand.
rolling.
I
Awesome.
understand.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you, Attorney Anthony. Appreciate it.
Is that all the discussion? So we will have, whether the alternatives will be drafting up something by the first meeting in March to keep the ball rolling.
To be
So-
sure, I'll be relying heavily, too, on the expertise the county has in the subject matter, so,
Yes.
as well, for their input.
All right. Anything else?
Unless y'all want to stay, I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So moved. Meeting adjourned.